Hi guys, welcome back. Welcome to the FSX404 channel. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to fly a parallel entry into Corona Airport, just so you guys can see it and see what I'm doing. First, let me show you what we're going to do. We're going to fly to the Paradise VOR on a heading of about 135. We're going to establish ourselves on a heading of 078 for 1 minute. After that 1 minute is up, we'll do a standard rate turn to the left to a heading of 228. We're flying a heading of 228 to intercept a heading of 258 to the VOR. A good rule of thumb for intercepting VOR radials or VOR headings is 30 degrees. And then after intercepting a heading of 258 to the VOR, we'll overfly the VOR, then establish ourselves on a radial of 237 from the VOR and do the rest of the approach. One last thing about this approach we're going to do today is let's look at the profile. That will give us the altitudes. As you can see, it actually tells us here, fly out on a heading of 078 at an altitude of 3,100, do the procedure turn, come back on a heading of 258 at 3,100 until we reach the VOR. Once we overfly the VOR, we'll do a step down descent to 1,660 feet until we have the runway or the runway lights in sight, or we do a missed approach. Another last thing about this approach is let's go to the times from our final approach fix to our missed approach point. We have 2 minutes and 24 seconds before we have to do a missed approach. So that means after overflying our final approach fix, in this case the final approach fix is the VOR or the VORTAC. After overflying the VOR and establishing ourselves on the heading of 237, we have 2 minutes and 24 seconds before we have to do a missed approach. And I think I've done this a few times, so you guys know what I'm talking about. Now let's put ourselves in the airplane. We are at 3,100 feet. We are flying to the VOR on a heading of 135, and we have slowed down to 100 knots. Every airplane has its own approach speed. In the Cessna 182, the plane we are flying today, we can fly our approach speed from 90 to 100 knots. Okay, as we get very close to the VOR, we can see that needle is going to start swinging out. There he goes. Needle just flipped. Let's turn to a heading of 078. As soon as we're established on a heading of 078, we're going to start our timer, and we're going to fly on that heading for 1 minute. Technically speaking, in real life flying, we're supposed to start our timer right after we overfly the VOR. But the first few times you do this parallel procedure turn entry, let's wait until we're established on a heading before we start our timer. Heading of 078 coming up. There it is. Let's start our timer. Let's immediately put a heading of 258, the heading we have to fly back to the VOR, or the heading we have to intercept back to the VOR on our VOR heading. Well, let's set up for that. All we're doing now is we're flying that heading of 078 for 1 minute. The next thing that we're going to do is a standard rate turn to the left to a heading of 228. Remember that heading of 228 is going to be 30 degrees to the heading of 258. That way we can intercept that heading of 258 to the VOR. Okay, 1 minute. Let's do a standard rate turn to the left to a heading of 228. Now the needle is going to swing around and it's going to go all the way to the other side. That's fine. Don't try to jerk the airplane right now to intercept the needle. Do a standard rate turn to a heading of 228. We'll go back and we'll intercept the needle, but our main point right now is doing a standard rate turn to a heading of 228. Now let me talk real quick about being established on a heading or a radial to or from a VOR. What does that mean? Being established on a heading or radial to or from the VOR, respectively, means that the needle is inside this little circle on the VOR gauge. As long as the needle is touching or is inside that circle, we are considered to be established on that heading or on that radial to or from the VOR, respectively. When we are this close to the VOR and the needle is going to start swinging around all over the place, our main goal is to keep that needle inside that circle. We're not going to be exact, we're just going to keep it inside that circle just because everything is happening so fast. Okay, there's the heading of 228. Now that we're on the heading of 228, this needle is going to start moving very fast once it does, so we have to be on our toes. Okay, here comes the needle. Let's start a gentle turn to a heading of 258. This turn is not an exact science. If you remember from the tutorial previous video, I told you all we are doing with these procedure turns is putting ourselves in a position to intercept that heading back to the VOR. In this case, that heading is 258. We're not going to be exact because we're way too close to be that exact in this case. All we care about is having that needle inside that circle. Okay, let's make our heading of 262. That seems to be working out. Let's take out a little bit, and that's our final heading until we overfly the VOR. We're going to overfly the VOR in a few seconds, and that's going to be our final approach fix. Okay, there goes the needle. That we're just that close to the VOR. We're not going to worry about that until we overfly it. There he goes. The VOR just flipped. Okay, let's start a timer and let's establish ourselves on a heading of 237 from the VOR. From this point on, we are done with the procedure turn. This is not the procedure turn anymore. This is the last part of the Corona VOR approach. All the procedure turn did was put us in a position to do this last part of the Corona approach. As you can see, for the step down descent, we're descending pretty quick. At about 1,000 feet a minute is a good descent rate for step down descents. Now that we're established on a radial of 237 from the VOR and descending down to 1,660 feet, we're going to start looking for the runway visually. Okay, here's 1,660 feet. Let's maintain that until we're sure we see the airport. Yeah, okay, there's the airport lights. So let's immediately continue the descent down for a landing. Actually, the way I set up this weather today in this approach and the time, this reminds me of those fires we had back in Los Angeles a couple years ago. This is what the sky looked like. Obviously, this approach does not line us up 100% with the runway, but this approach does put us in a position to land. So once we pick up the runway visually, we're going to align ourselves with the runway visually. A couple of adjustments. Final approach speed is good, altitude is good, and let's just land this thing. Okay, we're in the center line. Not too bad, not too bad at all. Now let's take a look at our flight path and see what that looked like. See what we did. Okay, we see we approached the VOR on a heading of 135. Overflew the VOR, established ourselves on a heading of 078. Flew on a heading of 078 for 1 minute. Then we did a left standard rate turn to a heading of 228 to intercept the heading of 258 to the VOR. Then we intercepted a heading of 258 to the VOR. After overflying the VOR, we established ourselves on a 237 radial from the VOR. We flew that 237 radial until we picked up the runway visually and we landed. So there it is, guys.